Hey everybody, and have you ever suddenly decided to follow a yellow flashing light for what to do next with your life? Like that? Oh man, what could this possibly be? Could this be a new quest or notification on my blue sky? Hopefully it's a cookie. Damn it! Picture this. It's 1983. You're in an arcade, and you see this, and wow, never seen games like this good before. Behold Dragon's Lair, an interactive adventure game produced by none other than Bluth. In case you don't know him, he was a prominent Disney animator from the 50s to 70s who worked on such films as Robin Hood, Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2, Pete's Dragon, and The Rescuers. After making his own independent short film, he would then leave Disney in 1979 after creative differences during the Fox and the Hound's development, going uncredited for his work on the film. He would set up his own studio shortly afterwards, giving us the cult classic that is The Secret of Nim. In 1983, he alongside Cinematronics would produce the video game Dragon's Lair, which used Laserdisc technology to show off full-motion video and movie-quality animation never before seen in video games. It would become the most popular game in America of that year, and it would also make way for other games in its style like Time Gal and Road Avenger. Nowadays, this kind of game doesn't really exist anymore, but it lives on through more story-driven games, particularly those from Telltale Games and Quantic Dream. Dragon's Lair's success would then inspire Dawn to make 7 more games like this, alongside Space Ace that released the following year. Too bad the industry collapsed on itself. Due to oversaturation of poor quality games, consumers felt burnt out and lost trust with video games, particularly in the home console market, causing interest in the medium to plummet at an all-time low in North America, at least until the Nintendo Entertainment System came out 2 years later. This would cause Dawn to cancel the 7 games he had planned on working on, and a sequel to Dragon's Lair would be shelved, with Dawn moving on with his career. But Dragon's Lair would receive some home console games, but due to how the arcade game worked, they would be completely different games. But as the technology caught up with them, you bet they ported these games. Nowadays, you can play these games via the Trilogy compilation on modern consoles. So today, we're going to be looking at these games to see how ambitious they were, and as to why they, and this genre of games, never really took off. Starting off with the one that started it all, Dragon's Lair. And the story is quite bog standard. Here you have Dirk the Daring go through a castle facing off all kinds of enemies and obstacles to save Princess Daphne. To compensate for the game's Laserdisc technology, it consists of quick-time events where you have to push a certain direction or sword button in time to progress in the game. One wrong move, you lose a life, and if you lose all of them, Dirk becomes undead, briefly judging you for no reason before turning into a spooky, scary skeleton. But thankfully, the Trilogy release does have unlimited continues. But to help you out with your movements, yellow flashing lights do briefly pop up when it's time to move. The newer releases of the game also has the option to show you what exact input you should do to help ease players. But even with this enabled, the game is just as easy as getting out of bed in the morning. Since the game relies on quick-time events, it constantly has you on your toes with how frequently it tells you to go left, up, or use your sword. But thankfully, this isn't too horrendously overwhelming, allowing you to appreciate the game's great animation. After overcoming these enemies and obstacles, you have finally reached the Dragon's Lair with Princess Daphne trapped. You take on the dragon and defeat it with your sword and get the girl, beating the game. This was pretty impressive for 1983, with the amount of obstacles to take on, with each having their own unique depth screens. Like Dawn did not need to go that far, stunning animation, and just the right difficulty overall. Where it's hard for sure, it's not too frustrating either. Although some scenes can repeat themselves in the same playthrough, and that if you've beat this game once, there is no replay value, hardly giving you a reason to go back, unless you really want to see the game's animation again, which is something you can do in the Trilogy compilation, but where's the trial and error monotony in that? Overall, this game is definitely worth checking out. Now for Space Ace, which is basically Dragon's Lair, but with a sci-fi painted coat. Here you have Dexter, also known as Ace, and his sidekick Kimberly take on the nefarious Commander Borv, turning everyone on Earth into babies, making them helpless. Why is the entertainment industry so obsessed with babies? Dexter gets hit by the ray, turning into a teenager, but can energize into his adulthood temporarily. Unlike the last game, this uses the animation to tell a more definitive story, as opposed to using randomly generated scenes. There was some fun to be had, and its difficulty was again manageable, aside from one part where I constantly died over and over again due to how tight its timing was. You then defeat Bluth with him becoming a baby, beating the game. Another solid one. Is it the most remarkable sci-fi game of all time? No. But it did have a pretty engaging experience with its animation and admittedly cool action sequences, but because of the game's more linear approach, it has less replay value than Dragon's Lair. At least that had different variations in its playthroughs. It's not gonna win any awards, but Space Ace was still fairly enjoyable, highly compressed PNG of Bluth on the game over screen aside. And finally, Dragon's Lair 2 Time Warp, releasing in 1991. I mean, with how popular the first game was 8 years ago, this would have come out sooner, but you know. In this, Daphne is kidnapped by a time-traveling wizard, and it's up to Dirk to stop him, and one thing I'm already failing to understand is that Dirk and Daphne managed to have this much children. Like, how many times did they have to get it on to accomplish that? I just really hope this doesn't lead to a weirdly mean-spirited show where I hate every single character. It starts off with a fun chase sequence from Daphne's mother, with Dirk heading into the castle from the last game, stumbling across a talking time machine, now going on a time-traveling adventure to save Daphne. Oh yeah? Well, 2 can play that game. Don't even think about it. I have to say, the animation is phenomenal, and it vividly brings the game's creativity to life for all the different time periods, especially for the Wonderland and Beethoven sequences. But there's one problem. I can't appreciate the animation because of how ludicrously difficult the game is! It was fine for the first 2 games where the actions felt perfectly spaced out for the player, whereas here, it feels like I have to press an unspecified direction every time Dirk breathes. And when you lose a life, you have to restart that entire sequence in one perfect run. There is no room to fail here. But as the game is about to reach its climax when you save the wizard disguised as Daphne in ancient Egypt, the game stops right there. So the game has collectible treasures hidden throughout, and when they appear you need to press in its direction instead of obeying the flashing light, and you need to collect all of them to access the game's ending, otherwise it boots you back to the earliest collectible you missed out on. How the crap was I supposed to know that? It's not unheard of having secret endings hidden behind unlockables, but at least they were optional, whereas this game is forcing you to make a perfect run, while also collecting these stupid items! You could have given us a bad ending where Dirk and Daphne are lost in time forever or something. Like, I can't help but feel sorry for all the kids in 91 who guzzled up their allowances on these damn machines. And thankfully there wasn't a ton of them. Well, I certainly ain't doing the time warp again, so let's go into the extras to watch the rest of the game. Okay, so the wizard puts a ring on Daphne, making her cursed. Dirk takes it off. With it now on the wizard, we get a fake out of Daphne being dead, and the 2 head back home, and then go on another adventure with their kids. Huh. This was a brilliant adventure with creative and well-executed ideas. It was consistently exciting, and it didn't overstay its welcome. But this would have worked so much better as an animated short film, especially one that played before another film Don Bluth made around that time in cinemas, like, I don't know, Rock-a-Doodle. The game demanded way too much from the player, and the criteria to unlock the ending is utterly ridiculous! When I said that these games needed more replay value, this is not what I meant. So the animation itself is great, but playing it made me see as to why these games aren't made anymore. And those were the Dragon's Lair games, and also Space Ace. Definitely interesting titles, worth checking out, but I can see as to why they never really took off after the first game. The gameplay felt limited due to its laserdisc technology, the trial and error monotony can leave players frustrated, alongside Time Warp's questionable design choices, and once you've beaten them, there's hardly any reason to go back unless you really wanted to see the game's beautiful animation again. They don't have the same depth other arcade classics like Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, and Space Invaders do. Not to mention, the wow factor of these games definitely has died down over time, with what was once thought to be impossible outside arcades can now be easily ran on DVD players. And I doubt the video game crash helped that much either in silencing these games. I think Don Bluth made the right call in moving on with his career, for better or worse. We also saw Dragon's Lair get a 3D game during the PS2 era, and a movie is being made by Netflix. So despite its dwindling impact, Dragon's Lair will always remain an interesting footnote in both the history of video games and animation. Thanks for watching.